It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
Welcome to Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock, each and every day here on the LRN.FM network. We are very, very blessed today by having Karen Kwiatkowski on to spend as much time as it takes to understand her perspective, which is, you know, I gotta share with you the bio. There was a couple things in here I didn't know. I've known Karen for years, and I did not know some of this stuff. Let's go ahead and start off. In 1978, she went into the Air Force as a second lieutenant. She served at various different posts and everything, but one thing, she was in Alaska, and she was providing logistical support for missions along the Chinese and Russian coast. So that puts you kind of up there in rarefied, I get to see, you know, special cables, know what I mean? You know, Julian Assange wanted to know her back in the day. Now, she served tours in Spain and Italy, but then she was assigned to the National Security Agency. She eventually became a highly respected speechwriter for the agency's director. Now, we can go on to a bunch of other stuff, but Karen, I'm not going any further until I hear about that one, okay? So you wrote speeches for the National Security Director. Who was director at the time you were doing that?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I knew you'd ask me that question. I can't even remember. He was a good guy. He was tall. I can't even remember his name. You'd have to go back. The time frame was, when was I there? Oh, my goodness. Late 90s, I think. Yeah, it was right before I went to the Pentagon in 98. So 97. Whoever was in charge in 1997 of NSA, and he did retire from that job. He didn't go forward into C.I.A. Sometimes they pick those guys up and transfer them, but he retired. But, yeah, the speeches, some were written speeches. And, you know, when you write a speech for some of these guys, they don't really go by your speech exactly. You're just helping them with the research, and you might put words down, but that doesn't mean they're going to say them. And then a lot of the other stuff was briefings and things like that. So
well, you have
it's an
two
interesting
books.
Job.
You have two books attributed to you also, African Crisis Response Initiative, Past, Present, Future.
I did a couple of research books, which were published within the Air Force channels, and of course, they sell them. I'm not sure how many people would want to read them, but they're things that I took on my own initiative. I guess maybe that was a sign. I did too much stuff on my own initiative. But, you know, I had been assigned in the Air Force under the Air Staff. That was the first time I got to work African issues. And so one of the things I wanted to do was really get smart on them. And so I ended up writing what became books. And so they were books, but in a sense they started as just really long, complex research papers. So they're not novels or anything like that. They're totally fact-based.
I tell you what it does. It shows that you had information at the highest levels to be able to even write a book that's titled African Crisis Response Initiative or Expeditionary Air Operations in Africa. And eventually you became, that was one of your stations. You were in charge of, what was your job? You know, it was in military intelligence in North Africa or sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, I'm not an intelligence officer. We were a consumer of intelligence. I was a staff policy officer in those regional areas. At one point, Central Africa, later North Africa, and part of the Middle East. So, you know, I'm a consumer of intelligence, not a creator of it. If I was a creator of intelligence, you know, an actual trained intelligence officer, I would probably be even angrier than I was as a consumer by what was done, to the intelligence system by the neocons, in particular, in the rush to invade Iraq.
Okay, now we're going to get to that. Now we're going to get to
yeah.
everything. Certainly, you have a lot to say about Libya. I mean, this is stuff that, went through you. So as a consumer of this intelligence that would come from the field and so on, you would go through it. You'd make sure it didn't, conflict with some other feeds that you were getting. You kind of put it together. You send it off to who? To whom were you giving this information to?
Can you say that again?
The information that you were collecting, that you were receiving.
Oh yeah. As a staff officer, we sat there and did our jobs, taking the raw not the raw intelligence, usually the processed intelligence. Sometimes info bits that were not, really vetted, but we would use that as background and content for policy guidance papers, background papers, preparation type papers up the chain. And so my chain would be, Doug Fife. At some point, it was Peter Rodman. He kind of got shut out later. He's not really a neocon. But Doug Fife, Paul Wolfowitz, and of course at the time, Rumsfeld. So these are the people. When I worked at OSD, I mean, these are the people that are our customers. All the staff officers did much the same thing. And when I worked in 2 places when I was at Office of Secretary of Defense. And the first shop that I was in was Africa, North Africa, Central Africa. Not so much North Africa, but really Central Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. That's where I worked. Now, I was transferred, not because I wanted to be, because they were short of bodies. People were quitting, dropping like flies. Nobody wanted to work for the Middle East policy. Bill Lutey, the reputation was out there. It was a neocon nest. And so I was drafted to go over there, and at that point, I was shifted up into North Africa as my regional area. Had the same customer. Doug Fife was my boss in both of those cases, but he was not interested in Sub-Saharan Africa at all. So when I worked for Sub-Saharan Africa in OSD, I had no dealings whatsoever with Doug Fife or Wolfowitz or Rumsfeld, none, even though they were still our customers. We'd send papers up, and they'd sit there. They would just veg out. They were not something they were interested in. And it was totally different when I went to, obviously, the Near East, South Asia, Middle East office. That's where Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, Fife, Lutey, these guys, Dick Cheney, these guys are obsessed with the Middle East. And, you can make some logical conclusions, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it when we get to Libya, why they're interested. And it's not terrorism, I don't think, although terrorism is very convenient.
Well, why would they, put such emphasis on that area and not the rest? We're running short on time here. This is the question that I have. Africa is going to become a big, important part in the world sooner or later. The dark continent is going to raise its little old head. Look at all the goodies we have. Look at the resources we got. Look at the untapped. Right. Yeah, the goodies. And right up, and it kind of sits there. It's like our piggy bank that we'll get to later when we want to, right up until China says, you know what, we'll take it now.
Yeah, China's going to tell us. Is going to greet us at the door when we decide if this empire that we have right now in the United States does not collapse on itself. If it attempts to continue, if we point our imperial fingers towards Africa, we will be greeted by the Chinese. They're already there, and the Africans like them because they do their empire a little differently than we do.
Yeah, they got actual money instead of with a tank. They bring a checkbook.
That's right. That's exactly right. The Chinese, maybe they're commies or statists and socialists and awful people. Who knows? But one thing the Chinese are is traitors. And they know how to cut deals, and we don't. The political class in this country, the class in this country that makes our foreign policy, our imperialist leaders, in a sense, and they don't call themselves imperialists, but that's how they think. They're not traitors. These are, I consider them a parasite class, and if you put them on the street, they'd have a hard time making a living. So, but the Chinese aren't like that. You could take. I don't know any of the Chinese communist leaders, or whatever they're calling themselves now. I don't know if they call themselves communists anymore, but whatever they are, you could take those top guys, put them on the street, and they'd be rich men in 2 years. They know how to cut deals.
We're going to be talking with Karen Kwiatkowski for the entire show on how the deals are getting cut and we're getting cut out. And for what reason? Are we just going to bring our aircraft carrier and say, hey, we're back at the table? How's that going to work out? Well, I don't know anybody better to talk to about it than Karen Kwiatkowski. We'll be right back here on Declare Your Independence.